Okay.
Hello. Maybe we'll turn that up. We need to turn that up a little bit, or can you all hear? Can you hear in the back? Yes, good. Down in front, Tucker. Well, welcome to the 123rd Business Roundtable. Of course, we're not around round tables today, so a very different format, and we want to thank Movie Tavern for hosting us. Manager Travis is here with us, but we appreciate great food, and they do a lot of corporate events and civic events, as well as their regular Movie Tavern experience. So this is a new one for us, and we really appreciate you hosting us today, so thank you so much. We've had over 10 years of roundtables and never been at the Movie Tavern, so I hope we'll be welcome back. My name is Rick Overy. I'm the vice chair and a local business owner. Two purposes we have at each of our gatherings. The first is fellowship. That's a little bit harder today because we're not around tables. You all are in comfy chairs with food in front of you. But Roy also has a lot more information. We have done this traditionally, I think maybe a decade or more. In January, we talked to Roy and said, well, if we push it back to February, we get better data because the year-end data is all out. And then there's a lot going on, both in the U.S., the region, and the world. So he's got a little bit more information for us this time than he's had in the past, so we're going to get started early on his presentation. Before we begin, I want to introduce people who can help you grow your business, which is the second purpose of our gatherings. Today, City Council, the city manager, and key staff are in the annual budget retreat. They had tried very hard not to schedule it on top of the EDA Roundtable because they would rather be here with you listening to Roy's presentations than sitting across town in the rain going over the budget. But none of them are here today, and they apologize for not being able to be with us. Our Commissioner of Revenue, Laura Overy, is here in front. And they're in a busy season, so if you haven't returned paperwork to her, you probably should look at that. And if you don't, Kevin O'Brien is the auditor in the back, and he'll be contacting you. So good to know both of them before they call you. So please take time to introduce yourselves. Also, we have our, besides Michelle, who's at the retreat, we do have EDA staff. So the Associate Director, Yuri Adams, is here. Yuri's doing an incredible job. Thank you, Yuri, keeping us straight. We also have Joanna Scarborough, who's the tourism grant specialist in the back, and Marie Calford, who always greets you out front and keeps us all straight. So please thank them for their involvement. But they're really the first point of contact with the city for anything to do with business. So if you need help, if you need running interference with other departments, if you have a question, they're the first point of contact for our business staff. And they're also doing a lot of reaching out to businesses. So we appreciate very much what they're doing. Caleb Smith, I think, is here from Congressman Lori's office. Thank you again for being here. And we think we've got her coming in sometime soon. Okay, I was going to say, we're not quite sure, but we're hopefully get the Congresswoman for our April speaker, so we're looking forward to that. Before I introduce our speakers, anybody who's here for the first time, has never been to a business roundtable, I know there's a couple of you, please stand up and just introduce yourselves and what business you're with. Welcome, thank you. Good. Was somebody else with you from the UPS store? Yes. Great. Welcome. Great. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Anybody else who's not ever been here before? Well, good. You other all are EDA Roundtable junkies, so welcome back. Professor Emeritus Roy Pearson has been a friend of the EDA for a long time and has been one of our most popular speakers, coming back each year to give us an economic update. He became William Mary Professor Emeritus in 2005 after 41 years of teaching at William & Mary and other colleges across the country. He has been preparing national, state, and regional forecasts for decades and has served under 8 different Virginia governors. helping them and providing them with key advice. Roy still does economic impact studies, including 2 for Jefferson Lab last year and 1 for the Port of Virginia. So obviously not getting the expansion at Jefferson Lab, but that was an incredible regional effort, and Roy was involved with that, and the port continues to be a key driver. So Roy is doing analysis on that. He's also an avid scuba diver. He's dived all over the world. He's leaning on a cane today because a board accident, not a dive under accident, but on a dive boat, broke his back 10 years ago and still did 5 more dives. So maybe he's paying for it now, but an interesting and worthwhile hobby. So Roy, we're so glad to have you back with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rick. Yes, please keep eating. Go back for more. You'll be able to hear what I'm saying, and I'll just keep on going. Well, thank you, Rick, very much for that. I'm going to talk kind of fast about the national part because what you're mainly interested in is the local economy, so I'll get to that pretty quickly. Looking at the headline up there, though, slowing and steady is the best way for the nation, and here locally too, to avoid a recession. I do not expect you're going to see a recession until well into 2021. I was talking to some of you earlier, probably about the third quarter if we get into a recession at all. So on that side, I'm kind of giving you some good news. The growth rates, however, are going to be slower, and that's one of the reasons that we're going to be following a pretty steady path over time. Real GDP growth, it was 2.9%. These 18 were all definite figures. 19 are preliminary ones for the nation. For the local area, those are all forecast on my part because we don't have all the 19 data yet. 20 and 21 are definitely all my particular forecast. What you're looking at on GDP growth then, looking at it, is a slowdown. We had a slowdown this past year to 2.3%. That number is already, that was the preliminary advice from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And I think everyone, including the World Bank, is expecting that to slow some more to about 2.3%, 2.1% rather, in this particular year. The World Economic Group has dropped it to about 1.9, 2.0. I'm still looking at it as 2.1, but then slowing a little bit more to 2.0 in 2021. Well, looking at that, that is in very good position relative to our production capacity. The Congressional Budget Office, which does regularly, this was from just before Christmas, their most recent estimate on our potential, what we can produce effectively, efficiently, without kicking off a lot of bottlenecks and kicking off higher prices, is the potential GDP. And we had been growing a little bit faster than that potential GDP for a couple years. We're slowing now to about the same rate as which our capacity is growing, which gives us a better chance of continuing. We're still running a little warm, not hot like it looked like we were going to be running last year, but we're still running a little warm, a little beyond our optimal production capacity. The output gap is only about 0.6%. It's less than 1%, and that is, you've got leeway in that in terms of your ability to produce. So that part, it's not great growth, but it is nice, steady, stable growth that could continue, avoiding a recession. Turning to Virginia now and to James City County, though. We got data December 12th. I sent Michelle a copy of the data, and also Chris, Economic Development out in the county. We got some nice data as of December 12th from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. We got revised data on GDP in the state of Virginia from 2001 through 2018, which is using some new methodology approaches and, in my opinion, more accurate than what we've seen in the past. But now we also have GDP data for over 3,100 cities and counties in the nation. So we have it for James City County, Williamsburg, and we have it for anybody you want to compare yourself to. You want to compare yourself to Charlottesville, Fairfax County, you want to compare yourself to Dallas, it's all there. You can download it, readily available. It's gross domestic product in real terms, 2012 dollars, and also in nominal terms. And you also have personal income data that's done in the same way, 2001 to 2018, for every city and county. So you give a modeler and forecaster like me a database like that, you're going to get some forecasts. So what you've got in here then for 2019, extrapolating and running regressions, I think what you were looking at for Virginia was 2% real growth, and James City County, Williamsburg, 1.9%. Just about the same as the state for 2019, but both of them slowing some, below 2% in this year and in 2021, as the nation is doing too at this time. So looking at the GDP growth, not great, but nice and steady, and still increases in the output taking place in this area. There's a different picture that you need to look at, especially locally though. That is real personal income, your income, that you want to be looking at. That's been growing better in the local area than nationally. 18 nationally, it was 3.1% here in Virginia, and this is adjusted for inflation. This is real income growth, 3.2%. And the estimates from the Department of Commerce are, it was 4.2% here, you folks. So a little better. That is slowing for the nation and for Virginia and also for James City County as we're going forward. There are several reasons we can get into later, but still you're looking at for 19, whoops. That button is very sensitive. I'll get back there in a minute. Can't hold it down, that's for sure. Okay. Looking at it going forward, 2020, looking at real income growth for Virginia and also for James City, a little under 2%, and that continuing into 2021. Still real gains, but less than a 2% real gain, and we'll see why some of that in just a couple minutes. But before we get into comparing apples and oranges, gross domestic product and personal income, need to review a couple points. The text is mainly for you to have for the future and how gross domestic product and personal income differ from each other. Gross domestic product, the word domestic means within your borders. So when we talk about the product for the nation within the national borders, when we talk about it for here within the James City County and Williamsburg border. So it's the local production. And the production we're talking about is the value added by individual enterprises, private and public. It's not your sales. It's sales minus anything you bought from another company. It's the internal production that you did. That's why you'll see in a few minutes a fairly small amount of output for retail trade, because you're buying most of what you sell from other companies. It's their production, not yours. So when we talk about GDP, think of it as internal to you and your organization. Even the intermediate goods were somebody else's production. That production, though, includes more than just labor income. That production includes corporate profits and recovery of fixed asset depreciation, true depreciation, the wearing out of your assets in your production process. So that's what that operating corporate surplus has in there. That's not in personal income. Retained earnings of corporations are not part of what you get. You get dividends, you get interest, but you don't keep the profits unless you're a sole person right now, a sole proprietor, mainly working in the gig economy, which we have more people here now in. But most of the personal income you have is less than what you have in total output in the area. So you would expect, since GDP includes corporate accounts that aren't in personal income is less than GDP. And it is nearly everywhere. In the nation, it's 86 point personal income is a little better than 86 or 86.6% of GDP. It's lower because you don't have those corporate accounts in there. But let's take a look at the local area. Want you to focus on the orange bar and the gray bar. The orange bar is Hampton Roads metropolitan area. The gray bar is Virginia. And if you look back at 2004, the Hampton Roads area and the state of Virginia, personal income as a percent of the output in the area was in the low 80% range. Look at that orange bar and that gray bar all the way across to 2018, and you'll see, hey, it's a little higher now, but it's still in about the 85% range. Personal income throughout Hampton Roads and Virginia runs a little less than the total value of output, since you're looking at the income just received by the resident people. Well, look at what happened here, though, for James City County and Williamsburg. And these are always combined in the national accounts. Any city is combined with the county it belongs with if you have a population below 100,000. So you're not going to be having separate Williamsburg ones anytime soon. You've got to hit that 100,000 level before that's going to happen. So we'll be showing it this way for a couple more years. Looking at that blue bar, though, 2006 personal income here was equal to the dollar value of the total output in the city and county. And it's been going up basically ever since then. 2018, the personal income coming in here, you residents were receiving, it's 132% of the dollar value of output. That, you will see in just a minute, is a lot of money. And you want to be thinking about that. As we'll see, you need to take a second look, do some more research on who your customers are. Talk about that some more in a few minutes. But looking at it in dollar terms, you're more familiar with today's dollars. That's what you trust in terms of its purchasing power. So, James City County, Williamsburg, 2018. The gross domestic product here, the output was $4.66 billion. Now, in the D.C. area, working with Congress and all trillions are what come to mind, but 4.7 billion is a pretty good amount for an area this size that we're looking at. But that's what was produced within the boundaries. James City County, Williamsburg, though, the personal income people were getting here was over $6 billion, okay? The difference is an extra $3.36 billion in purchasing power that you residents had versus production in this particular area. So, quite a difference. In the last chart, though, and in what I'm going to show you in the next chart, in order to see how things traveled over time, you do have to adjust for inflation, because that annual 2%, about 2% increase is the main thing that has happened over a 14 or 15-year period. So, going to the next one. Here we're looking at that gross domestic product. All those stacked areas, that's the actual production in James City and Williamsburg since 2004. What you're looking at on the red line is that additional total income that has come in this area, which has grown very steadily ever since 2004. That's that 32% extra income versus the dollar value of production. Well, let's look at what's in there. Down on the very bottom, manufacturing output. Manufacturing output in the companies here, it's been turning up the last couple of years, but it's only 17% of the total production by manufacturing companies in this particular area. It rose in the period 29 versus 2011, but then basically followed the general pattern of the rest of the GDP here, with it slowing down and at a lower level. Not much growth over the whole period. The next category, though, is the one most of you are probably interested in. For the legend, I had to abbreviate it as AERAFS. The long description is in the bar itself. Arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodation, and food service. And some other of the federal data is just called leisure and hospitality. But this is the industry grouping that is used in all the national accounts for basically tourist-oriented businesses, businesses oriented towards visitors. Well, that particular group is 11% of the total output here in 2018. And you notice it's essentially about the same percentage and same level that it was back in 2004. It hit a peak in 2010, as we'll see in a minute, and has basically drifted down since then. The next group, retail trade, I already mentioned, that's the internal value added within retailers here. It doesn't include their value of the goods that they were selling. The gold bar is the one that interests me here, and that is local government and state government. It's also a major state enterprise here, the College of William and Mary, which has been growing. So we've had growth in the government output in this area, and not just in terms of government services, but in terms of the college itself. Then 18% real estate and rental. This is an area that it peaked earlier, but it has been growing too. Many of you are in that particular area. And we're going to look at the income there in a few more minutes. But the largest other group wanted to bring up, all other, and this is a lot of you folks, the service industries, construction, transportation, are all in that sector. that 34%, look how it's been growing. It's been tracking that income line that you have up there. And that's why I said, think about who your customers are. Go back to 2004, all other green industries were mainly providing services and goods to local manufacturing, local tourism, local government, the other producing industries. Now what you're looking at, the major customers for a lot in that all other, that 34%, that group has grown 44% since 2004, while the overall production has barely grown. So you as businesses are serving a lot more of the people who live here but aren't earning their money here. We'll take a look at that some more in just a couple minutes. But I want to explore some things here. You're interested in the tourist business. We said you can compare yourself to 3,100 cities and counties around the nation. So go ahead and see who you'd like to compare yourself to. But I did it for York County, York and Poquoson, and for Hampton Roads and Virginia and the nation. Now this is my wife said, Roy, that chart is too complicated. It's 2 axes and the numbers along the bottom. The purpose of this one is for you to look at the blue line and see it's going somewhere different from the orange line, especially in recent years. The blue line is the output of our arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodation, and food service businesses here, the core tourism. And yes, look at the upper left-hand corner, or any of those. Yes, it did peak in 2010, and it peaked in 2010 in Hampton Roads too. But look at where those lines went after that. Basically, output in that industry in Williamsburg, James City, has been drifting down since 2010. But look at York Poquoson. Yes, it fell during the early part. It started turning up around 2013. It has been growing modestly. Look at Hampton Roads as a whole. It turned around after 2013 and has been growing at a pretty good clip. Look at the state. The state peaked out back in 2006. And yes, with the Great Recession, it was down across the state. But again, since 2013, that tourist-related industry has been growing quite rapidly. At the nation, what happened to you is about 2009, because of the beginning of the Great Recession, you had a dip. But then nationwide, it's been growing steadily all through that period. So when you look at the blue line, on one side, it brings out you folks are unique. On the other side, it brings out you're not marching to the same driver, same drummer as York County or the MSA or Virginia or the nation. And that makes it very hard if, like me, you're trying to do regressions, because the drivers that let me forecast for Hampton Roads and the state don't let me forecast for you. That you're going to have to be searching more diligently than I've been able to since December as to what your drivers are and who your customers are and how you can get it growing again. So I'll leave that as a thought for you to be looking at. Okay, going back to personal income, let's talk about the income you're getting in here. The blue line, that's 40%. It hasn't been changing much. But earnings by place of work, that's what people working in Williamsburg and James City County take home. Okay, it's 40% of the total, and it has gone up a little bit here recently. It's only up 2% though since 2004. You go a little higher, that 15% adjustment, that's earnings adjustment place of residence. They use this for any locality. They're saying, hey, you got a lot of residents who don't work here. That's people who are working somewhere else in Virginia. I knew a pilot who commutes to Chicago for his flights. So they're working outside of the local area, but that's their earnings. And you can see how that has more than doubled since 2004. And this is inflation adjusted. This is real income. You have a lot more people and a lot more earnings of people living here who don't work here. If you add them together, the 40 plus 15, 55%, that's the income of every resident that is working here. But an awful lot of that is from people not working here. You can see how that's changed over time. Then we get to that nice gray area, and it's literally gray because it's how it's measured. Dividends, interest, and rent. How many of you own your own home? Hey, that's most of you. Congratulations. The rental income there is you. And she's not going to charge you a business license for getting it either. But nationwide, shelter has a lot of value. Houses provide shelter that's a valuable contribution to output every year. So in the national accounts, state accounts, all the local accounts, they had to get an accurate figure of GDP, they have to include the rental value of housing. So they treat it as you rent to yourself. And they go to great pains to figure out that rent, but it's also going to change as the value of housing changes too. It's not a nice steady number over time. But they treat you as receiving income. So the rent part of that gray area, since that's resident income, that's actually being locally earned by the house you're living in. The rest of it, though, the dividends and the interest are predominantly being earned somewhere else. You're not getting those dividends and interest as payments for local production. So, when we look at the very last line, the gold bar up here, that's me, what you've got in that area. Government, those personal transfer payments are nearly all Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It's transfers from the federal government. Now you may say, wait a minute, how about on the... Providing you with Medicare is essentially an in-kind service. And they're saying, hey, in a lot of areas, you get actually taxed on incomes, in-kind services. You don't own the Medicare that you're providing. So that last gold bar up there is mainly retirees. Me, among others, like they said, I retired in 2005. So I've been part of that group almost since the beginning that you're looking at up there. That area has more than doubled since 2004. You have all noticed more retirees living here, coming here. I live out in Powhatan Place. We have a high percentage of retirees in that, and in Powhatan Secondary too. You have them all over town. That's another market here. External income coming into this area. So you look at those bars, the orange, the gray, and the golden one you're looking at. Over half of the income in this area now is not being earned here. It's coming in from outside of this area. That's why I said some of you I know, Ken and some others, you've been servicing this group for a long time. Some of the others of you in local businesses, take a close look at who your customers are. All of your checkout counters don't have a place to put the zip code in, although a lot of them do out at prime outlets. So you can see exactly where your customers are coming from. So there's been quite a change. The data that has come into us shows quite a change that has taken place in the local economy in the last 14 years. A big change in, not much change in what we produce, what the production is, but a big change in where the money comes from in this particular area. Okay, let's talk about some downside risks that you have here. Is it a gutter ball or a strike that's coming up from the coronavirus? And this you're going to want to keep tracking for at least the next couple months. Now, when you look at this, yes, it's a health issue and it's a tragedy in terms of any severe illness and death. But so far, it is not a major economic issue. And most of the views are it's not going to become a major economic issue. In other words, this isn't going to cause a recession this year. It didn't with SARS in 2003. And it's not going to be doing it this year either. It can be reducing growth, yes. I like what the Economist Intelligence Unit put out last week, the assessment they're looking at. They have 4 scenarios, and they're saying any business really should prepare for all 4 of the scenarios. You need a strategy for anything that may happen. But their base case scenario is 50% probability that by the end of March it will be contained in China, which will have some worldwide repercussions. Then when we say contained, it just means no new cases coming up. It doesn't mean you've gotten rid of it. It's just not expanding anymore. And they're saying, okay, even if it goes to June, what we're looking at is if the containment is in this spring or this summer, the Economic Intelligence Unit thinks it's only going to affect world GDP, world output, by about 3 to 4/10%. Their world forecast is going to be lowered from 2.3% to about 2 or 1.9. So it would be taking about 0.25% off of worldwide growth. Well, looking to the United States then, it's not going to be taking more than that off of the U.S. growth. Look at what we have so far in terms of containment. As the map the CDC published last week, there is no case south or east of Illinois or south of Massachusetts. That so far it is being contained pretty well, not spreading like it is in China. If it continues to be fairly mild in the contagion, then you look at what happens here in terms of the impact on the economy per se, relatively mild. Where the risk is in the next slide. This is an index that's worth going to pretty regularly. The Economic Uncertainty Index. You can predict a lot about state income and state GDP tracking this thing. What they do, the outfit who does this surveys major newspapers around the country for phrases and words that reflect fear and uncertainty. Okay, it's worth taking a look at. And what happens here, as those fear or uncertainty indexes go up, people spend less, especially on discretionary spending like travel and going as a visitor or a tourist. So what you're looking at here, if we go back to 2010, when tourism here hit its peak. Well, what you had in 11 and 12 that was a downer was sequestration. You did, mathematically it shows, you got hit with sequestration too. But look at what happened to that spike between 10 and 12. The spikes you had in the uncertainty index. Yes, that affected people's spending quite a bit in 2011 and 12 too. Since that time, uncertainty has been dropping. What you're looking at across here now is, okay, it fell to its lowest point in 18, 19 with the tariffs and the battle going on over trade. It spiked some again, and then it's been back down as we go into the beginning of this year. So one thing to be looking for if you're doing travel forecast or tourists, look for a spike in that in the next couple months. If you get a spike in the uncertainty indexes back up to the 2011 levels, which were the same as the uncertainty in the Depression, our Great Recession itself, that is going to be affecting your travel spending. So you want to be looking at the numbers, what happens in income, what happens in output, but look too at how people feel. Are they more uncertain? Have they become more fearful as a result of something like Corona? That will be affecting quite a bit on what happens here. It will even affect whether they buy a house or not. When you folks who are realtors here, they may not want to make a commitment that big if that uncertainty grows. So keep track of the news reports and people's attitudes when you're making your next forecast. Thank you very much. Any questions? I'll be glad. Oh, if you have questions you'd like to ask me about the data or anything too, the very front part has my email over there. Send me an email to get the question. The county last year sent me a letter, but I retired in 05. I don't go pick up mail every day at the Mason School of Business. So if you send me a letter to the Mason School, I may not read it till May. So just drop me an email. Yes, sir. The question is, what happens with the election up there? What does that do to the forecast? Okay, all the outfits right now, Global Insight, the IMF, they're betting Trump will be continuing as president, okay? At a little better than 50%. But when I'm looking at it, though, I'm saying kind of neutral on this. I've been looking back at the previous elections and all. That's why I said we're going to do well into 2021, in my opinion, regardless of who wins. As long as it's, well, one candidate, no. But whoever gets in November, Democrat or Republican, they're not going to change things much. You can't do much in January and February that's going to change the whole course of the economy before the end of the year. People haven't been doing that in the past, and very unlikely to happen this time too. So I will go on that forecast being pretty accurate for 2021 within margin of about 0.4%, depending on which way you go. The main thing that can swing it is that uncertainty index. As people get very uncertain and very worried about what's happening at the end of the year and the beginning of 2021, that can slow down. Consumer spending is the real strength right now. Investment was really lagging until very recently here. Now it has picked up as we have had the agreements around phase one on China, and more importantly, the USMCA. That's going to have much more impact than any trade agreement with China. But we have that behind us. That's one of the main reasons the confidence index is better now than it was. But as things progress the rest of this year, what happens to that uncertainty and confidence level at the end of the year would affect what I might tell you next year.
Thank you. One other comment, if you could. Last week.
Let me let someone else take a question, because we're only going to take one more question. Sorry.
Huh?
One more question.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're great. Right at one. Go ahead.
Do you have any sense that there's a meaningful part of the economy, the gig economy or the barter economy, that isn't captured or that's changed in recent years?
Rick and I were talking, capturing the gig economy, the Labor Department keeps trying to get a better handle on this, different ways of doing it. It's pretty hard. If you look at the data that I'm using here, the number of sole proprietors in the Williamsburg area has gone up a lot in recent years. And divide that into proprietors' income, it's only averaging $21,000. But you've got part-time gig employees here in the Williamsburg area who, I would say, look at that proprietor's income and what's being earned. It is showing you a trend that's happening towards sole proprietors who are not earning a whole lot, who are in this area. And that can give you some feel on the gig economy too.
I'm going to cut it off there. Thank you so much.
Okay.
You're always well paid when you come to speak to the EDA. But here's some Virginia peanuts to enjoy.
Thank you, thank you.
A big round of applause.
This is part of that in-kind income I was talking about.
We don't want to throw off your figures.
Yeah.
Well, you see why he's been one of our most popular speakers over a number of years. Really good data. Why our local area is not tracking with national and regional averages, particularly in one of our most important industries. So really useful, interesting stuff. And actually, council asked that this presentation be taped. I wish they could have been here, but I'm going to encourage them to watch what was discussed here today, because I think it has real implications for how we do things going forward. So we try to finish by 1 o'clock each month so that you can get back to business. But we thank you for being here. The next lunch will be March 10th. So look forward to that, and we'll announce the speaker soon. But make it a great day to do business in Williamsburg in spite of the rain, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Again, thank you so much.